Joining us for this edition of Weather Center. I'm Sharon Rizalton. We're going to put the national satellite picture into motion and give you a view of a very massive amount of moisture that is stretching up from the deep south all the way on up into the eastern Great Lakes and northeast. Now the problematic thing is that we're finding a lot of cold air sticking around, especially close to the surface, extending from the Great Lakes into the northeast, and a lot of that moisture is falling in the form of freezing rain. So it's very active here in the east, relatively quiet as we head out into the west, and that's a signal of a fairly amplified pattern. A ridge out to the west, a deeper trough across the east, so this is where things are unsettled, and this is where things are a little bit more tranquil. We are seeing a few showers into portions of Washington state, but nothing that's really going to affect you around the Seattle area. A little bit of snow might even fly heading into the higher elevations. You can see not all of this reaching the ground, some of it tending to build southward. At the very most, maybe a few sprinkles, we think, at this point, but so far, not a whole lot to talk about there, and certainly not a major storm by any means. There's a look again by mid-morning on Saturday, some of the higher elevations picking up a little bit of light snow, but that's about it out to the west. Quick check on earthquakes, and the strongest one here measuring about 2.7 around Santa Cruz Island, and around San Juan Bautista around 3.3 on the Richter scale, just south of the Bay Area. We travel into the northwest and on into Alaska, and nothing to report. As we look at the national picture, I mentioned it's fairly quiet out to the west. Oh boy, we make up for that in the east. There is no doubt about that. As we continue to see all the moisture streaming northward, warmer air is also moving in with those southwesterly winds. And as it rides up over that dome of much colder air, we're finding the frozen precipitation, the potential for freezing rain, and the potential for some snowfall. Snow is coming down where all layers of the atmosphere are cold. The freezing rain coming down where it's cold closer to the surface. So it's a real big problem, and significant icing can be expected as we extend from portions of Pennsylvania on northward toward areas like, say, Binghamton, New York, and also from around Washington, D.C. and Baltimore up through Philadelphia and stretching into southern sections of New England, including the Hartford and Worcester areas, and even some areas just to the west of Boston. Boston changing over to some rain some time ago, but just off to the west, temperatures cold enough to support more of that freezing rain. And some areas where the moisture is really coming down, and since there's more down the pike heading your way, we could find maybe some icing, maybe a third of an inch perhaps of icing. So significant icing expected over portions of the northeast, and significant icing even heading down toward Baltimore and Washington. Eventually some of these areas are going to change back over to rain. Very slowly we've seen temperatures here around Washington and Philly inching up the scale. We want to see those up over the 32-degree mark before we can call it safe, but for now, it's still seeing some freezing rain in some of these locations. It's a rain event from Cincinnati back down through Lexington. Boy, what a wet ride along I-75 all the way back down toward Chattanooga. And you can see some of the thunderstorms that are rumbling through central portions of Tennessee. To the north, a more feathery appearance to the radar picture indicating where the snow is flying around Detroit and Toledo, certainly on into the Cleveland area, and a new batch of snow dropping southward across Chicago and Gary, Indiana. As far as amounts of snowfall, we'll get to that in a second, but a quick check on who's going to see the wintry precipitation, and that pretty well spells it out, doesn't it? Look at all that darker pink. That's where the icy conditions exist. Watch it west of Boston, around 495 on westward, back out toward the Worcester area, around Hartford, Connecticut. Not so much into New York City. You've changed over to rain, but extending down toward Philly, D.C., and Baltimore, Binghamton, New York, and anywhere here into interior Pennsylvania. Really have had a tough time seeing those temperatures go up and above the freezing point, and as long as it's below freezing, you are going to find some very messy conditions in the form of freezing rain. As far as amounts of snowfall, some significant snow in and around Cleveland, and also extending back out toward the Buffalo area, and eventually changing back over to snow areas like Binghamton as we get into the early part of the day on Saturday. In the Deep South, the problem is strong thunderstorms. The tornado watch is no longer in effect, so that is certainly some good news. There's a look at where thunderstorms are likely to be strong or even severe, although we have not had any severe reports for quite some time. Again, there's a look at your Saturday forecast, keeping it wet across much of southern New England, and finally drawing things out as we head into the early evening.